Hi everyone, my name is Dominic Arjado. I'm a web developer, and these are your guides, tips, and tricks to web development. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to build an email template using MJML email framework. So in my previous video, I did an introduction about it and also showed you how to set up a local development for it. So we're going to use the same setup in this video. So if you want to check out that setup in detail, you can watch that video first. But if you just want to get started right away, you can also use the boilerplate that I created. So I'm going to use it right now. So I'll be adding the link to this boilerplate in the description below. So I'm just going to copy this and clone. So I'll name this project as MJML sample EDM. So also I'll be sending you guys, I'll be adding a link in the description below for the images that we'll be using on the email template. So what we'll accomplish by the end of this video is this email template that I have right now. So it's a pretty simple email template, but I think this should cover most of what you'll need for the next time you need to build an email template using MJML. So you have the email title, the company with the logo header, and then the hero image, some contents over here with, and then a button, some contents with an anchor tag or a hyperlink, and then this wrapper over here with a different background and 3 columns, and then another button, and then lastly are the footer. So yeah, some assumptions that I have is that you have some web development background and some basic knowledge regarding NPM, Yarn, HTML, and CSS because we'll be using those technologies. All right, so once you clone it, let's open our project. So I'm using Visual Studio Code as my IDE. So if you haven't installed it, you can pause this video and install it. Once you do, you can open the project. And first thing you need to do is check whether you have MJML Visual Studio extension. So I also added the link in the description below for you to install it. And once you install it, we can initiate our project. So you also need Yarn in your system. So install that if you haven't. And well, once you do, we can do Yarn install, which basically installs all the dependency that we'll be using so that we can run our local development setup. All right, so once that's done, let's test out one of the script. So to run our local development script, you can do it so by running yarn dev. So yarn dev is just basically the start script and the server script. So start will basically convert our MJML code to HTML, and then the server would serve the HTML index.html. Let's run that. So you will open it over here. So if this happens, you can just do a refresh and it will be all right. So this is the code in the boilerplate, but we can just clear this out and start from scratch. One of the features of that extension of MJML is the code snippets. So once I start typing something, so MJ head, once I press enter, it will automatically write the code for me. So this is what MJML's initial structure will look like. So if you know HTML, this should look familiar to you. This is actually somewhat a replacement of the HTML tag, and then the head and the body. So that's what I like about MJML. It doesn't look too new or too foreign for me. It's just basically an extension of what we already know. So for MJ head, you have guessed it, we normally put most of the styles or what we call an attribute. So later we'll get into that. And then the body is where we put most of our code in. So this will be basically the email template. So to start with, you can write the first component, which is MJ breakpoint. So this MJML component basically is like an indicator whether what's the width that we need to go mobile. So for this one, if we go below 600, it will become mobile layout. So for example, you have 3 columns. Once it reaches below 600, it becomes one stack on each other. So that kind of a thing. And that's it for MJ Breakpoint. So next would be attributes. So we'll be using some of MJML components. I mean most of it. And we can have specific styles for specific components, or for example, we can create a class. So we normally declare it inside the MJ attributes. So what I want to do right now is basically apply MJO. So MJO, basically all of the components of MJML would have this specific style that I want. So I want the color of the full text, because most of the text right here is 2C. It's slightly grayish black. That's why I declared it and apply it to all of the components. You can still override this when we type something, when we override this on the specific component, but most of them will have a default color of this color right here. And then the next one is the font family. So I'm not using any special font for this, it's just Arial. So all of the components should have a default family of Arial. And then lastly, it's just the padding. So it should be 0. Because some of the MJML components have a default padding and we don't want that, especially if we're trying to follow this email template that we want. Or for example, you have a designer who provided the design. You may want to follow the design. Yeah. So next, we can start writing the code inside the body. Normally, I like to write names of each section so that it's easier to maintain the feature. So this guy right here is what I call the email title. How do we start with? We can use one of the components of MJML, which is the section. So from the word itself, it's basically each section of the email template. It has a default width of 600. So we don't need to declare that because this is exactly 600 width that the container of each section is. The next tag that we'll be using is MJ group. So before I explain that, let me show you the next component that we'll be using. So MJ column is how our email templates become responsive. So for example, you want to have 3 columns, you will be using 3 MJ column right here. And then when it goes mobile, which is this breakpoint, they will be stacking on top of each other like this. You can see. And for most cases, for example, the email title, we don't need it to have that stacking feature. Even though we don't need to declare MJ group here and just use MJ column, it's still safer to add that MJ group so that MJ section doesn't need to apply a certain style to make it stack on top of each other. So that's why we have MJ group over here. And then lastly, to write the text is the MJ text component. So if we save this, it will just be a normal text right here. So we need to add some styles for this. So we can do that inside the MJ text. So this should have a color of, I think, 999. And then font size should be about 10 pixels. Line height of 18 pixels. And there's also a padding on top and the bottom, which is IPX, and then the text should be centralized. You can do that by doing align center. So there's actually no text align. So to align text or content, you use align center. All right, once I save this, all right, it looks exactly the same. Oh, we forgot to style the body, so it should have a grayish background over here. This is using white. You can declare background color over here. It's a bit grayish, so it's F2, F2, F2. All right, the reason why it's moving because there's a scroll bar over here. So later when we have a scroll bar here, it wouldn't move already. All right, so you may have already noticed that how we define the styling for each component looks exactly the same as how we define it on the CSS. So that's another thing that I like about MJML. There's not much thing that you need to learn. It's just basically an extension of what we already know. So moving on to the next section is this header over here with the logo. So let's call this as header. Then same thing. The only difference comes to the MJ text with it's actually not a text but an image. Oh, before we do that, there's actually a folder of images that we need to import. So I'll add it on the description below on how to download these images. And we don't need the logo, the MJML over here. All right. So now what component we can use is the MJ image. And then going to the images is the logo over here. It should have an alternative text of out. And yeah, before I complete this code, you may have noticed like, why do we need to declare most of these components? Can we actually just use MJ text? The answer will be no. That's because MJML restricts this and there's a common standard that you need to follow. So with the MJML extension, you will actually have an inline error over here. So when you hover, you will say the error that it cannot be inside the MJ body. It needs to be inside column, hero, or attributes. So don't worry if you're not used to it. The MJML extension would warn you if there's an error. All right. So this one should have a width of 130, 35 px. And then the column will have a background of white. Some padding, which is 20 px around it. Okay. Once I save this, all right, we now have the company header. That was easy. And moving on to the next, is basically the same as the company header. But this is the hero. It doesn't need the background color white, but it is using a different image. So you can have it alternative text. Show keychain. Then we can actually not declare the width because we want it to take over most of the width, 100%. So if we don't declare, it will be 100% of the parents component. And remember that MJ section has a default width of 600, so it will follow that. And once we save, and there you go. And one thing to take note on mobile is actually already fluid. So you will adjust based on the browser width or the email platform width. So that's cool as well. Next thing is the contents. So let's start with this. Hi, Dominic. And call this the main content. Formatting. Need the width. MJ text. Right. So I start with Dominic. Oops. And then This Dominic is bolded, so we can use the HTML tag strong. It's like bold. And then you can just have 2 breakpoints over here. And this text. Okay. So this MJ text should have a font size of 14px. Line height. And also the background of this section is white. Here as well. You can have it here or you can have it here. I think it's pretty much the same. Then padding of 20px. Then before I move on to this list and the button, let's write this code over here. There's a reason why we're doing that first. Let me just type in the code. Break. That's because you notice these two actually we're just repeating the styles. So you can actually make it reusable by using one of MJML's attributes, which is class. So instead of having to keep writing it, we can create classes. So I'm going to name this as body text and then the styles over here. And how can those components use it? You need to declare the attribute for body text. So same as the name. And this guy over here, we just use the same one. All right, so once I save this, you can see that, yeah, they have the same styles. All right, now we can move on to the list. So same thing as well. Now we can anticipate that each line over here uses the same style. So let's write the first one. Let's just copy this first. Then we can declare this class as the list text. And I'll just repeat that. Just copy the text. Oops. Then we can style it right over here. And this is actually has a padding top. You can see there's a padding on the top. 20x. And the line height is 28px. Once we save, all right, now we have the list. And next on, moving on to the button. The button, there's a special component for that, which we'll be using right now, which is the MJ button. And it can also have a link. So you can declare it like an anchor tag. So href, so I have a target blank. And before I add styles, if you can notice right down below, there's also a button. And they have some similarities. So we can actually create another class. I name this as button. And we can have specific styles over here later on. So let's just start with the button first. Same thing, declare it MJ class. So one thing to know about button, there's inner padding and padding. So inner padding is what's inside of it. So padding, I use it for spacing around the button. So for that, we just need the inner padding. And then the border radius over here, it's about 8px. and should align the text in the center. Font size should be 14px. Font weight is 500. Line height is 20px. 22. And there's another special attribute that we'll be using here, which is fluid on mobile. So, for example, it reaches, let me show you, reaches a certain point. The button, you see that the button is actually quite large in width, but when it reaches here, it becomes fluid. So we want that to be true, so that it has a fluid width. All right, so once we save that, we should now have a button. So I think we forgot the text. So as the text of this. So now we just need to add the color. So right now it has a white background. Then actually it should be transparent. Yes, transparent. And then the border color is also different. 3, 4, 3. And then the color of the text is the same. Let's check. Then we can add specific spacing on the top. Which is about 20px. I think that's about it. There should be a padding here as well, below the button. All right, we're already halfway our email template. That's cool. So the hover effect, let's tackle that later on. What I want to do now is the anchor tag over here. So you may be wondering, can we use another text? Nope, we can't. So maybe I can just show you. So if we try to use another MJ component inside the text or button, it actually doesn't work. MJML ignores it. If you see, it doesn't become a button. So what we can do here is we can actually use HTML tag. Then how do we style it? We can create a class. So for this one, our call is as tag body anchor text. And we can actually use this one. We have to declare it on another component of MJML, which is called MJ style. This MJ style can be accepts an attribute of inline. So not like how we have these stylings, this is all inline, and we want that to be the same for the anchor tag. Okay, so I declare body anchor here, and it should be display inline. Color should be blue. And then font size the same as the body text. And by default, anchor tags have an line below them, so we don't want that. We want that when we hover on it. And then let's just add a cursor pointer over here, and there you go. So we'll add the hover effect later on. Let's just move on to the next section. So this section, I name it as the benefits. You can see there's white background, and then inside it, there's a gray background. So how do we achieve this? We can use one of the components of MJML, which is called MJ wrapper. So MJ wrapper can accept multiple sections. So it's really good for this use case. And this should have a background color of white. And then padding, it's about 10px on the top. 20px on the side, 20px at the bottom. Then the MG section. Sorry, I should be pointing at this one, the white background over here. And then inside it is the grayish background. So each section can have that background color. So this background color here. Then there's a border radius at the edges. So for this one, we're just starting at the title first. So at the bottom, it doesn't need to have a border radius. So how can we do that? Just declare the radius on the top, left and right. And the rest is 0. And then MJ group, MJ column. You can have paddings over here. X 0. Oops. And then this title over here. Oops, it should be X. And this text should be align center. Font size of 6, and it is bolded. Just align height of 22px. All right, so once we save that, there you go. Then let's move on to these 3 columns. So just like I said, MJ wrapper can have multiple sections. This one, you won't be needing MJ group because we want them to stack on mobile. So we can straight away use column. By the way, if you have columns like this, you shouldn't declare width. It should be 100% or just don't declare at all. It can be a pixel because it breaks the fluidity or like the responsiveness of columns. All right. So as you can see, each of them have the same styles basically. So we can already anticipate that each of the column you can create classes. So let's just declare them on top first. So the class. So each column, I'll call it as benefit. So this one is just paddings. So on the top, there's a padding 20. On each side, left and right. Then below, we just make it a 0. And then that's it. Just the container. So the images also have the same styles. I'll call this as benefit image. It should be aligned center, width of 100 pixels. Then the next one is the title. So image title is also center. The padding top of 15px here. And the font size should be 14px. Font weight is bolded, so 700. Line height is about 18px. Next one is the content. So same thing, but it's not bolded and it's smaller. Same line height, yeah. And padding on top should be about 10 pixels. So yeah, we can use this class in here. So first is the benefit. Next is the image. So we already have the images over here. I'll just copy that out. Then the title, just text. And just declare the class. It's benefit title. I forgot about the image. Benefit image. And the content. declare the class benefit content. All right, so let me just copy this first below, where we can see the 3 columns. So if we look at our code now, oops, something is not right. Oh yes, benefit here, and the section should also follow the background color. And it should have a padding at the side. All right. So now we have 3 columns over here. We just need to replace the correct one. So that should be pretty easy. Let's check the template. Content is also different. It should be 3. Different title and different text. All right. So once we save that, let's look at our template. All right, it's exactly the same. I think there's an extra space that we don't need. Over here, it should just be padding top. All right, fix that. Now let's move on to the button. So remember, we already created a class for the button over here. Let's just use that as well. So it should be another section. Then we need to use the group, column, and finally the button. So this has a different text. Then remember, this also has a different style. So that button right there. Let's first have the background color of the section. Okay. So remember, we have to have the radius at the bottom over here. Let's do that. Spacing over here. You can add it over here. That's about 35 at the top, 15 on the side, and below is 20. Border. We don't need the border. Just have the background color that's the same as the text, and text should be white. I think that should be it. Let's check it out. All right. Now moving on to the company footer. The company footer, there's a border on top. Do that in the MG section. PX solid, and I think it should be using the same as this one. Then it's also using the same gray background. So let's use that here. Then complete the structure. You can see it's actually 2 columns. So one for the text and one for the logo. So we don't need to declare group because we want it to stack on mobile. So let me just copy the text. So technically, you can have 2 MJ text over here. So one for this and one for the bottom, which is slightly gray. But I wanted to show you that you can also do it in HTML tag and basically have a specific class, which is text gray. Why would I want to do that? It's because I can already anticipate that the anchor tags over here have the same color as that grayish color. So why not just use a class? So we can reuse it. So you can add it here. Just get that color. I think it's, yeah, it's this one. The color is this. Oops. Just close this. And continuing with this one, I think this should have a padding. Oh, for this class, we can actually use the same class as the body text. Is the same 14px and 22px. This should actually be MJ class. Let me see if I miss anything. There should be a padding also. 10px and 20px. And then next is the logo. So this should be image of the logo. It should be 93px. And then as you can see, it's aligned to the right. So to the right, and there should be a padding of 10px so that it looks central, vertically aligned with this one. So I think that should be it. Let's save it. And there you go. You now have the company footer. So to finish off, let's complete the rest of the template, which is the footer. So same thing, same structure. So we don't need it to stack on mobile. Column, and then the text. As you can see, most of these texts have the same font size and line height, I would say. Let's create another class, which is the footer text. All right, so on top, declare it over here. Class footer text. We should have a text over here. Hold on. It should be 10px. Oh, 12px, and then 15px. And then I think we can use this first. Start copying this text. This text is bolded, so we can just use strong. Then this is an anchor tag. So remember we created, we can use anchor tag. Oops. Let's just copy this. And then the link should be a mail to. We don't need a target blank. Let's save this first and check it out. All right, there should be a padding on top, which is about 20px. Okay. X on the top and at the bottom. All right. What you can see here, the anchor tag looks bigger than the rest. So we can actually use body anchor tag. Let's create a new class, which is footer anchor tag. I mean anchor text. Let's just create a new one. You can copy the body, but modify the size. This should be the same as the footer text, which is 12 and 18. So once we save that, there you go. It's now the same font size as the rest. And moving on to the terms service, can be a new text, but still using the same class. and just a padding of 15. Is 15. Then there's two anchor tags. Let's use this. So this. And another anchor tag for the privacy policy. Just copy the link and copy this. Let's check it out. So the footer anchor text, it should be gray. So remember we created a text gray over here. So we can actually use it here. So that's why I created that class in the first place. So once we save that, all right, that is fine. Then the rest of the text over here. Another ng text using the same class, footer text. And then it's just breaks. This is actually an anchor tag. Below. It should be a telephone. Don't need a time. Should be. So let's check it out. Okay, we need it to be the same color as the rest. So we can create text black or text blue. So I'm just going to use text blue over here. And it should be default color. And we can add the text blue over here. All right. I think once I save this, it's actually the same. Oh, there's a spacing over here. I think this should be padding top IPX. All right. Now it's exactly the same. Great job, guys, but we're not done yet. Remember, we wanted to add hover styles over this. So let's do that. So first of all, the easiest to do is the anchor tags. So we have two classes over here, which we can use. But in order to have hover styles, you can actually declare it right here without the inline attribute, because in normal HTML, we also have to declare hover styles in CSS. So we can inline them. It needs to be under styles or your CSS file. You can do it like this. And once you hover this anchor tags, you just want the decoration, text decoration to be underlined. And remember, these are all inline tags. So over to override inline tags, inline styles, you have to declare it as important. So once I save that, there you go. There's already a hover effect for the anchor tags. So next one is the button. So for buttons, we actually can't use this MJ class. We have to create our own class, because this is specifically for MJML components. But for MJ style, you need to have your own style. So I'm going to use button dark, and this is button dark. This is button dark outline. All right. So Let's add in the style first. I mean the class on each button. So when we add class over here, we should be using CSS class. So remember, MJ class is for the MJ attribute styling. But for style CSS, this is CSS class. That's button dark. And the other one, let me find it. This one. So this is bottom dark outline. And when we add this class, let's inspect first. This is actually not the anchor tag, but the actual class is added at the parent table data over here. So we should add the styling such that it hovers on the anchor tag. So the parent is here, and then when the child anchor tag is hovered, then we add the style. All right. Just check that out. So for this one, we want the color to be white. And of course, it should be an important. And then background color is like black, almost black. This is this one. Then same thing as the border color. Then I think that should be it. Once I save this, it should have the effect. All right. But one thing to note, as you can see this background, when you zoom in, there's this white color on the edges. How do you solve that? That's because when you inspect, hold on, this is actually the background color of this TD, I mean table data. So we need to override that color as well when we do the hover effect. So you can do that by the TD is hovered, then the background should be the same. So let's try this out. And there you go. No more white color on the edges. Cool. So are we done? Almost. Let's just check the mobile. So in mobile view, this will get stacked. That's fine. But right here, we want our logo to be on the right, I mean on the left. And also we should add the padding over here. So we can also declare it on the MJ style. So same reason for having hover styles, you can only declare it on the CSS level or the style level. You can have it as inline. So what you can do, you can declare a major query over here. So because we're using 600 pixel, it should be major query that's only string and max width of 90x. Then we can create a class for the logo. So company footer logo, I mean image. Then we want it to align the left. Once we align it, we want some spacing above it. So let's just add that here as well. Top 20px. All right. Then next is with the footer. Once I save this, before we do that, let's add it here first. So, same thing, we are using CSS class. Then the name of that class is the company footer. And there you go. It's aligned to the left and there's a spacing above the text. Great. Now, last thing to do. We're almost there, guys. Let's name this as CSS class footer. And then let's declare the class on top. Here, in the MJ style without the inline tag. For the major query, from the padding left to be 15, and to make it consistent, let's set it on the right. And there you go. We are done, guys. We've successfully replicated the email template that we want. And I hope this teaches you how to code in MJML. So as you can see, there's only about 243 lines. So imagine if you're doing this in plain HTML, you end up with this code, a bunch of table tags nested on top of each other. It's really hard to maintain this kind of code. And you see, there's about 697 lines of code. Compare that to MJML, you save a lot, and it's really easier to maintain. And they also handle the responsiveness. So I hope you learned a lot from this video, and see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.